Today's topic, unusually, will not deal with the weekly portion. I want to show some interesting issue related to things that are in some kind of process that is probably bigger than we can understand in the world, and a very specific point in it. And that is the matter of the conflict that exists between the Western world and Islam. A very brief overview, more or less, of what is happening is that things that started from our perspective, at least in terms of monitoring the situation, are bigger than they really are from the perspective of this boat. When there was a situation where the Americans intervened relatively long ago to save the lines of Saddam Hussein, a process of shock began there, and in fact the beginning of something that no one intended, but it did, and that was the disintegration of the Arab countries. The removal of Saddam Hussein was on the surface an important and great thing, and good for us too, because it would protect us, the people of Israel, the people who live in Zion. But what happened there began a very fascinating process that I would like to try to relate to from the perspective of prophecy and Kabbalah. But let's first give a brief overview. So what started with the removal of Saddam Hussein led to a kind of domino effect. The collapse of other countries, almost all the Arab countries, collapsed later, including Libya, Gaddafi. And the resulting uprising created the current war between Sunnis and women. When those secular dictators who ruled these countries fell one after another, it happened in Iraq, it happened in Libya, it's happening now in Syria. It's almost happened already, and it's probably not over yet in Egypt, when the Muslim rabbis came there again, and were then pushed back by the current dictator there. But the situation there is very, very uneasy, and it's not certain that it will be there for a long time. The countries of the Arab world simply collapsed, and as soon as they collapsed, the whole religious war broke out. You have to understand that all these rulers were secular rulers, and they ruled at a level of dictatorship in their own time. And after they were removed, what happened was that suddenly the whole thing about the various minorities and the old wars and the war between the Sunnis and women broke out, and is basically shocking the entire Middle East. Now it's happening in Yemen too. It's happening. It's getting closer to Saudi Arabia. We're in a kind of a very, very problematic process for world peace, and the Western countries are trying to somehow intervene, but they are reacting passively when the ones who are actually leading it are the Arabs, and they are like they are required to intervene, and they are hesitant and do not intervene. Certainly not the current administration in the United States for the last 8 years, which is a regime whose policy is an isolationist policy that says, let's deal with our problems, let them break their heads. But overall, it doesn't work that way, and we see what happened. What's happening now? Europe is in a state of its own, a bundle of troubles because of all these struggles, the Syrian refugees and the Greens, and anyone who comes there and basically aspires to change the entire reality in Europe and the world, needs to understand that the goal of the Islamic State is not only to create an Islamic State in Syria and Iraq, but to take over the world. We are seeing here some kind of Islamic religious awakening that, at this stage, is busy with internal struggles among itself, Sunnis slaughtering Shiites and Shiites slaughtering Sunnis. But the West will have to intervene in one way or another, certainly in Europe, when things start to get bad. A trend that began with the threat of this immigration, the immigration of refugees in quotation marks to Europe, Europe will need to clean up. It cannot remain passive for long, and certainly not the United States in the long term. Now, how all of these things connect to the fantastic things that are found in Judaism is something that I would like to try as much as possible. We have a short time today to focus on in particular, and I read about this topic in Edom and Ishmael in the last days. There is a very famous passage. I haven't had the chance to talk about it here, but I have had the chance to talk about it a lot. And I'm sure you've heard about it, too. Maybe a famous passage in the Zohar that is found at the end of Parashat Vara in the book of repentance. And it describes many, many years in advance, long before Muhammad was born and long before they built the Gedim in Jerusalem 1,400 years ago. The Zohar was written by Rabbi Shen Yakeh, who lived nearly 100 years ago, 1,800 years ago, 1,800 years ago, 900 years ago. And in the famous Zohar, at the end of Parashat Vara, he talks about the spiritual right that the children of Ishmael have, which is related to the fact that Ishmael was Abraham's son and Abraham received the commandment of circumcision, and the Holy One, blessed be he, pledged to Abraham through the commandment of circumcision that he would give him the entire land of Canaan to inherit after him as an eternal possession. At that time, Abraham was 99 years old and Isaac had not yet been born. There was a covenant between the Holy One, blessed be he, and Abraham that if he were circumcised, he would receive the land of Canaan and his descendants after him for their generations as an eternal covenant. At that time, Abraham had one son, who was named Ishmael, and he was circumcised. The Zohar says that there was a discussion in the court of heaven between the minister in charge of the sons of Ishmael and the Holy One, blessed be he. For hundreds of years, it was called an attempt to intercede and the minister in charge of the sons of Ishmael. This is how he was called by the Zohar, the minister in charge of the sons of Ishmael. When in fact he asked the Holy One, blessed be he, did you promise Abraham and his descendants after him who are circumcised the land of Canaan to inherit forever? How is it that Ishmael never received rights in this matter? Ishmael was expelled and had no part of the world in the land Canaan. I will confirm that Isaac was actually the one who won the land of Canaan, Isaac, Jacob, and Israel. So the Zohar describes 1,800 years ago that there was a discussion about it, and the Holy One, blessed be he, said to the minister of Ishmael, it is true that I promised Abraham that if he were circumcised, he would have a circumcision, and the land of Canaan would belong to him, and to his descendants after him. But Ishmael did not continue, he did not fulfill this condition as it is written in the verse that circumcision should be done at the age of 8 days, and Ishmael was not circumcised at the age of 8 days, neither he nor his descendants. In the circumcision, there are also instructions on how exactly to do it, and Ishmael did not do it completely. So he removed the foreskin, and we know that Ishmael did it and they came down to Muhammad. And from Muhammad to this day, in the commandments of Islam, they should do it, they do not do it exactly, they remove the foreskin, but it is not correct according to our law. In any case, these were the two claims that the Holy One, blessed be he, answered him. It was not done on time, it was not done properly, and therefore he does not deserve a share in the land of Israel. He does not give up, says the Zohar. And he says, that's right. It's not. It wasn't done in time. It wasn't done according to the standard. But still, he's Abraham's son and he was circumcised. So the stranger says, that's amazing. And I want to address the things that come later. But I'm mentioning it anyway to show the sequence. The Zohar says that the Holy One, blessed be He, said to the servant of Ishmael that, indeed, because they are descendants of Abraham and because they have a circumcision, only it is not in time and not according to the standard, they will have a right in the land of Israel when the land of Israel is empty. This is the language of the Zohar. They have a right in the land of Israel when the land of Israel is empty, just as their circumcision was empty without perfection. Now the Zohar continues and says this. And these things were written again about 1,800 years ago, when there was no Islam and no Muhammad. That was hundreds of years before. The Zohar says this. And the children of Ishmael will rule over the Holy Land for a long time, while it is empty of everything. Just as their circumcision was empty without perfection, so they receive measure for measure. They have a circumcision. There is a framework. There is no detail. This is called an empty circumcision. They have a right over the land when the land is empty. It is empty. He continues and says, he said this in succession. And the children of Israel, the children of Ishmael, will rule over the Holy Land for a long time, while it spits out everything, just as their word spat out without perfection. And they will hinder the children of Israel from returning to their place, until the right of the children of Ishmael is fulfilled. That is, they were in the land for a long time, when the land was empty. When the time comes for the Jews to return from exile to the land of Israel, they will find the children of Ishmael there, and there will be a follow-up. They will hinder the children of Israel. They will follow the children of Israel. This is the language of the Zohar. Now, on this whole matter, there are entire lectures that I spoke about, as stated. Not in this context, but it is found. Anyone who wants to can see it on the internet. The Arab-Israeli conflict in the mirror of prophecy and Kabbalah appears in different variations. I want to address the point that from here on, the Zohar continues after all this, that is, after it predicts. Let's understand what it actually is. We saw the Zohar predict many years in advance that the children of Ishmael will rule over the land for a long time. This is the language of the Zohar. A long time. Now, I did the math. What does a long time mean? A long time, a long time. Time is a relative concept. What is a long time? A year is a long time, yes, compared to a day, but a year is really not a long time compared to 2 years or 1 year or a year. So it says a long time. You have to understand what it means. So I did a very simple calculation. Anyone can do it. The establishment of the mosques on the Temple Mount, which since then has actually had this place. Muslims have a claim on it. It becomes a holy place for them. It is the third most important place for Islam after Mecca and Medina. They call it Al-Quds. Al-Quds, the holy city of Jerusalem, or the mosques there. These mosques were established 1,400 years ago. About a year after the death of Muhammad in 630 AD. That is about 1,400 years. When you do the math, you can see that this is a long time compared to what, compared to all the time that we have historically been in the land since the conquest of the land by Joshua the son of Zechariah until the construction of the first temple. 480 years have passed. Solomon builds the temple in Jerusalem. From the exodus from Egypt to the construction of the first temple, 480 years have passed. This is what is written in the verse in Kings. That it takes 480 years for the Israelites to leave from the land of Egypt to take down the 40 years in this wilderness, 440 years from the crossing of the Jordan until the construction of the first temple. The first temple. We stood prepared 420 years, 410 years. Sorry, 410 years. If we add that to 440, it is 850 years until the destruction of the first temple. After that there was a 70-year exile when Jews were not in the land. They returned and built the second temple. The second temple stood on a machine 420 years, and if we add that to 850 as mentioned, 440. From the crossing of the Jordan until Solomon built the first temple, 440, 410 together, it is 850. We add another 420, it is 12,270, 12,270 years. This is all the time we were in the land. The rest of the time without being in exile, 70 years in exile in Babylon, and almost 2,000 years until today, scattered in all corners of the world, so that the Muslims control the land of Israel, and especially when it comes to the land of Israel, it is mainly about Jerusalem, it is mainly about the Temple Mount. 1,400 years, it's been a long time, so the Zohar knew this in advance. The children of Ishmael will change the Holy Land for a long time. Not only that, he also goes on to say that when the people of Israel return in the last days, they will find a delay in the form of the children of Ishmael, who followed him from returning to their place. The people of Israel from returning to their place. And this is actually a description in a few words of what we have been experiencing for about the last 100 years, even before the establishment of the state, since the time of the teachers. This affliction, this sterilization, they do not allow us to be a free people in our country. Despite all the songs, this song is very beautiful, but the reality is reality. We do not control the Temple Mount. Hook controls the Temple Mount. The state of Israel does not control the Temple Mount. It has nothing to say about what is happening there. It cannot do anything. And the moment it tries to do something, it is not something at all. But they are already looking at it as a threat to the status of the Lord of the temple. The whole world is boiling and we cannot do anything, as everyone sees. In other words, they still control where it is. This is the Zohar in Parashat Yera, and not about that. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the next section. In the Zohar, the next passage in the Zohar is an amazing passage that describes what we see today. Or as I said earlier at the beginning, the events that are happening today in the world, in the Middle East, in Europe. It has probably reached the whole world at some point. Today is not far off. It has already arrived. September. Alan brought that conflict here to the United States, so that all this tension, everything that is happening today, is described in the following lines in the Zohar. I will read you the following lines. After that, we will also try to understand what it means. So the following lines in the Zohar, immediately after he describes the Arab-Israeli conflict, that is, that the people of Israel will return at the end of the world and meet in the land of Israel, Jacob, in the form of the sons of Ishmael, until the right of the sons of Ishmael is paid. He goes on to say, like this, and the sons of Ishmael will come. Pay attention to the words. And the sons of Ishmael will come to provoke great wars in the world. It is worth paying attention to the accuracy of the words here. First of all, in simplicity, what is happening is going beyond here. Maybe I will read a few more sentences so that it is understandable. And the sons of Ishmael will come to provoke wars, and in the world, the sons of Edom will gather against them and wage war. The war is a transition here, while the previous lines, as we explained earlier, deal with Ishmael and his desire to control the land of Israel, that they will rule there for a long time, and when the time comes for the people of Israel to return in the last days, they will find the delay. So, apparently, what is Ishmael and Israel talking about here? Now, he is moving on and describing that Ishmael is not referring to the land of Israel, as you will see shortly. He is referring to the situation where the children of Ishmael will provoke major wars in the world, not in the land of Israel, not in the land of Israel. And the expression to provoke wars is interesting. To provoke wars means that they will cause major wars to break out in the world. Now, let's first read the information that is here that is not entirely understood. It is not entirely understood today because apparently some of the events in general in world politics, in politics in general, in world politics, and in these processes, there are unexpected things. I mean, almost everything is unexpected. No one can really predict what will happen, and therefore we will read everything carefully without trying to give it an interpretation, because I think it is just not serious to give an interpretation to things you don't know how they will happen, but it's written here and everything that's written here so far has happened, which means that we probably don't have the data, but let's first see what's written. So first I'll read this. Brother, try to understand what we can understand. Who is this and what is not? And the future of the Ishmaelites will provoke great wars in the world. The __ will gather against them and wage war. Now these concepts, the Ishmaelites, and the __ are concepts that I would like to expand on later. What is the Ishmaelites? And what is the __ In general, it is Christianity and Islam. When Ishmael is Islam and Edom, we will see later why it is Christianity. So he says here that there will be a verification between Muslims and Christians. When the Muslims provoke great wars in the world, not in the land of Israel, in the world, the __ will gather against them. There will be a coalition of Christian countries against them and they will wage war. There will be one war on the sea and one on land. Pay attention to this very interesting wording, and one near Jerusalem. We will understand that we are talking about wars in the world, not in the land of Israel. We are talking about a verification not between Jews and Arabs, but between Ishmaelites. The __ which are Christian nations, will have 3 campaigns, 1 naval campaign, 1 land campaign, and 1 near Jerusalem, not in Jerusalem. Near Jerusalem, probably not in the land of Israel at all. Okay, and they will rule over each other. The __ will rule over the Ishmaelites. In the And, they will conquer the Christian countries, the Muslim countries, and the Holy Land will not be handed over to the ___. What comes out of this is that there is some trend for the Christian countries to take over the Holy Land, which is the land of Israel, and it will not succeed for them. For now, we do not see such a threat at all, but we do see some of the things. The big wars that have apparently begun, but who knows where they will end up? There are big wars in the world, there are wars near Jerusalem. I don't know if that's exactly what is meant or if it will be something even closer. But everything that is happening on our northern border and in Syria and Iraq is close to me. You could say that it is close. Maybe it could be even closer than what will happen in Jordan tomorrow. Jordan is also a country that is in danger. Its regime is actually in the same place. There was a danger in all the previous regimes that fell, the regime of Saddam Hussein and the regime of Assad and the regime in Egypt that fell. And there was a coup by the Muslim Brotherhood, and after that there was a counter coup, but this coup is also unstable, and what happened in Yemen and what is happening, and one day on Saudi Arabia and one day on Qatar and on Bahrain, all these regimes, so who knows what will happen in Jordan. And then it will be near Jerusalem, okay, and the Holy Land will not be handed over to the __. Now he adds information that is not at all understandable, but let's see what is written at that time. A people from one end of the world will awaken against Rome, a crime, and will wage war against it for 3 months. This is Rome. These things are said as a continuation of the previous things. We said, let's explain why Edom is Christianity, but we need to understand Edom in the language of the Chazal in completely different contexts. This is Rome. When we talk about the exile of Edom, we talk about the exile of Rome. This appears everywhere in all the Midrashim. The exile of Edom is Rome. Rome founded the Romans. The Vatican founded the Vatican. And Rome is Rome. This is the place where the center of Christianity is located. So after we talk about a conflict here between the sons of Ishmael and the sons of Edom, a state of war in which the sons of Edom will overpower and subdue the sons of Ishmael, a people from the end of the world will arise. There is no point in even trying to guess what and who, but which people will it be. But it will come to war against Rome, that is, against the center of Christianity, which is Rome, the Vatican. At that time, a people from the end of the world will arise against the Romans of sin and will wage war against it. For 3 months, nations will gather there and fall into their hands until all the sons of Edom have gathered against it from all the lands of the world. It is not entirely clear what exactly is going to happen here. A people from the end of the world will come and fight against Rome. The sons of Edom, who are Christian peoples, will come and fight. The question is, with whom will they fight against that people who come from the end of the world? Who is this people? Where does it come from, and what is its interest in fighting for Rome? Yes, there is a great war there. Many peoples will fall there. Then it is written that the Holy One, blessed be He, will arise against them. And this is what is written, He sacrificed to Hashem in Basra. What is written later, to seize the corners of the earth and shake off the wicked? From there and here again he continues with things that there is no point in even trying to determine in detail what is meant, but we just need to know that these things are written, that this story ended with the revelation of the Holy One, blessed be He, in fact in the process of redemption. What is written later, to take hold of the corners of the earth and the wicked will flow from it. He explains and destroys the children of Ishmael. From it? From where will he begin the children of Ishmael? From where does it mean that from the land of Israel there will be no more children of Ishmael in the land of Israel, and he will break all the powers above? Powers above. According to Kabbalah, every nation in the world has a spiritual power that is the spiritual representative of the nation in front of the Holy One, blessed be He, and he will break all the powers above. And there will be no power above over the people of the world, namely Israel, but the power of Israel alone. And this is what is written, the name of the Lord is your shadow at your right hand. And this is where it ends. This is the description that appears there in the Zohar. Now these things would seem completely incomprehensible, especially not this passage where he describes the children of Ishmael there who want to rule the Holy Land. They deserve that the land of Israel is empty. When Jews come in the last days, they will find Ishmael. He delays them, and then suddenly he makes a transition to the struggle between Arab countries or Muslim countries, the sons of Ishmael and the sons of Edom. The big wars, apparently we are starting to see them as the biggest wars in the world. What started 4 or 5 years ago seems like the starting point of this. It's actually hard to point to a specific point, but I mentioned to you earlier this issue of Saddam Hussein trying to threaten Kuwait, not just invading Kuwait, and as a result, the Americans intervened, and that's where the process of the collapse of Arab countries begins. That's where it begins. Saddam Hussein was the first to be overthrown from his rule, and we became chaos. We became total chaos in Iraq. After that, Gaddafi. After that, it also happened in Egypt. In Egypt, in the meantime, as we said, the situation is as if Sisi, the current president, took power by force from the Muslim Brotherhood. But you have to understand that the Muslim Brotherhood has a lot of power as citizens in Egypt. It's just that it's a dictatorship. So then they rule there with a strong hand. But there could be a revolution like there was against Hafez al-Assad and his son Bashar al-Assad, and they removed him from his rule, at least his seat is in danger. Now it can definitely be read. Jordan is in the same situation. In the same danger. There is also a name for it. A dictator who rules over his subjects. This is a minority that rules over the majority. And the situation, in short, is very problematic. Wars are starting. These wars are not getting weaker. At this stage, we do not yet see a reconciliation between Christians and Muslims. At this stage, we see a reconciliation within Islam itself between Sunnis and women. But this alignment is dragging Western countries into intervening in favor of Assad and, paradoxically, in favor of Iran. Because the Iranians are the Russians' allies in trying to fight the Sunnis, who are Al-Qaeda and ISIS. The Americans are in an indescribable mess. Because they support Saudi Arabia in a certain place. Saudi Arabia is the main supporter of the Sunnis, of Al-Qaeda, and ultimately of ISIS. So it turns out that the Americans are now in a kind of situation where they are against the Russians. There is a very big mess here. Who knows where it will end? It will end, but in the end, like which is described as a state of war between Christianity and Islam. How is all this related to the Gods, and how is all this connected to the issue of the Gog and Magog war, and the coming of the Messiah? So there are some very fascinating things here. Again, I really don't know how long we will have to cover this. Let's start with the issue of understanding what Christianity is, that is, why do Christians call the __? I will explain the problem. Edom is Esau on Tanana from this red. That's why it's cold. His name is Edom. Now, if Edom is Esau, then Edom is heaven, because Esau is the son of Isaac and Rebekah. That is, both of his parents were heaven. Unlike Ishmael, by the way, his father was a Semite and his mother was Hagar's mother-in-law, an Egyptian from the tribe of Ham. But Esau is a Semite from both sides. He is actually Jacob's brother, Jacob's twin brother. In the lives of the brothers, Jacob and Esau, after all the struggles their sons had while pregnant, in the struggle for the birthright, in that he wanted to kill him, he returned. Sent angels, came to him with a force of 400 men. In the end, it ends with hugs and kisses. Bottom line, what happened in the lives of the brothers? It is written about Esau that Esau took his family and went to a land because of Jacob his brother. He went to a land. That is, he did not stay in the land of Canaan. He went to the land of Edom. To the land of Seir, which is the land of Edom. The land of Edom is in the blankets. The land of Canaan. The land of Edom is in the eastern part of the southern Dead Sea, in the present-day part of southwest Jordan. This is the area called the land of Edom. Now, if this is the land of Edom and these are the genealogical roots of the __, how is it Christianity? Christianity is Rome. Clearly, this is the point that we will try to understand a little. So here is very fascinating information found in Basel. There are a lot of sources here. I will only bring some of them. You need to know history a little here. Some of the things are still described in the Bible. A historical event that is important to note here, in order to understand this, is the exile of the 10 tribes. The exile of the 10 tribes occurred about 130, 140 years before the destruction of the first temple. Those who initiated the exile of the tribes were the Assyrians. The Assyrians are an ancient people who lived in the area where Syria is today. Apparently, there is also a connection between Syria and Assyria. This is the same in terms of the place. At least I don't know. Genealogically, they belong to them. But Assyria, the Assyrians, were a power. Before the Bel, they were a power. And they came and conquered the world. They wanted to be an empire. And they were an empire. And they had a very interesting system in the way they did their conquests. They conquered the world. And they had a very clever concept. They knew that if you go and conquer a people, and leave a trace of that people in their place and rule over them, it's a recipe for trouble. It's a recipe for rebellion. The people feel that this is their land and some foreign power comes and sits and conquers it in order to avoid a situation of rebellion against the rule of the Assyrians. They acted very wisely, at least from their point of view. They did a population exchange because they conquered a lot of countries. So, when they conquered a certain place, they would expel all its inhabitants so that they wouldn't sit on their land and be occupied under them on their land. Instead, they exiled them to another place where they had no connection to the land. to some other place, to another people that they conquered. And sorry, and they did a population exchange. That's exactly what happened to Sered, the 10 tribes. The 10 tribes were conquered. This is the area of northern Israel, that is, what was the kingdom of Israel from north to Jerusalem northward, where the 10 tribes lived. They conquered them. They exiled them to Hala and Hur, Gozan, and the cities of the Medes. They brought in their place the inhabitants who were there and settled them in Samaria. And they are the ones who are called Samaritans. These Samaritans are Gentiles that the Assyrians brought as secular populations in place of the Jews whom they exiled. Now the Gemara Midrash describes that after the 10 tribes were exiled, it already appears in the Bible that Sandi, from the one who initiated the exile of the 10 tribes, was Shalman-er, king of the bullocks. That was the name of one of his successors. One generation later, Sennacherib tried to come and complete the task and conquer Jerusalem. This is described in the Bible in both the book of Isaiah and the book of Kings. He came at a time when King Hezekiah came, just a few years later, after the exile of the 10 tribes. At the time when King Hezekiah was walking in Jerusalem and the prophet Isaiah was in Jerusalem, and he came and surrounded the city with a huge military force and built a siege on it and tried to conquer it. The Bible describes that the Holy One, blessed be He, said through the prophet Isaiah, "Do not be afraid of him. He will not come to the city and will not throw a wall on me. By the way he came, Jerusalem will not fall." And truly, it is written in the prophet, both in Kings and in Isaiah, that the angel of the Lord went out at night and struck Sennacherib's camp. 180 army leaders, 180 commanders died. And behold, they were all lying dead. As a result, the siege of Jerusalem was now being repulsed. This is what is described in the verses of the Bible. In the Midrash in Parak, Rabbi Eliezer writes that when Sennacherib came to conquer Jerusalem, he went out with his army to conquer all the countries in the region. All those who were also south of Jerusalem and all the peoples around Jerusalem knew exactly what fate awaited them. The Midrash says that because they knew that they were powerless to face the Assyrians, they fled to the desert and mingled with the sons of Ishmael. Who are these peoples? Era, the peoples of Gebal, Ammon, and Amalek, the Philistines, the inhabitants of Tyre, were also there. Edom accompanied them, they were called __. All these were peoples who lived there, and they mixed with the sons of Ishmael. Now, the name was again a mess and a mess, and they fled and mixed, and that's how they basically fell apart. There are also historical implications to this. From a literary point of view, the Gemara describes that in the second book of the second book, a few hundred years later, a Gentile, a believer from the sons of Ammon, came and stood before the Sanhedrin, and said to them, "I want to convert." Then Rabban Gamliel said to him, "You cannot be converted, because it is written in the Torah, no Ammonite or Moabite will come in the light of God forever." Rabbi Ishmael, who was the deputy of the rabbi of Rabban Gamliel in the Sanhedrin, said to him, "You can convert him." Rabban Gamliel said to him, "What does that mean? You can convert him? There is a verse in the Torah, no Ammonite will come in the light of God." Then Lub says, "Rabbi Yehoshua." Rabbi Yehoshua says to Rabban Gamliel, "You can convert him. Why? Because the believers are not sitting in their places. They mixed, and no one really knows where he is from, and the majority in the Sanhedrin. He supported this, and it was possible to convert him against the opinion of the president of the Sanhedrin. Now this has a halachic implication. What this means is that, since the time of the coming of the Sanhedrin and confused the world, we do not know about any of the nations of the world to which nation historically he belongs, because all the nations have mixed with them. Now there is a prophecy that there is one of the sources of the things that I want to show you. This prophecy is a very mysterious prophecy of Balaam. Balaam, son of Beor, was called by Balak on the journey of the children of Israel to the land of Israel to come and curse the people of Israel. The Holy One, blessed be he, told him, as he died in the story of Balak, do not curse the people, because blessed be he. He wanted to go. Nevertheless, the Holy One, blessed be he, told him, you know what you want. Go, but you will not say what you want. I will put the words in your mouth. Then he came and tried to curse, and blessings came out of his mouth, and the Lord your God will turn the curse into a blessing, for the Lord your God loves you. After 3 times, Balak tries to go with Balaam to curse Israel, and all once, blessings came out of Balaam's mouth. Balak panicked because, as he believed in the power of Balaam's curse, he was very afraid of the power of the blessing. So he told him, Cob, I cursed you, and you blessed me. Run away to your place. Balaam told him, okay, I understand. You're disappointed 2. The truth is, I really wanted to curse, but I told you in advance that I have no control over what comes out of my mouth. Then he told him, this is how I'm going. But before I go, let me tell you what this people, the people of Israel, will do to your people Moab, in the last days. And he said, a year, how many very incomprehensible sentences. But it is clear that these words are prophecies about the last days. And these words are some of the things that the Holy One, blessed be he, put in his mouth. In other words, there is a prophecy here that the Holy One, blessed be he, put in Balaam's mouth that describes what will happen in the last days. Now, the sentences are in vain. They say very incomprehensible sentences. I will read to you only some of them. And he was lifted up from the prison and said, oh, who will live from Seva? To what is this? And Zim from the Kittim, and it is not Assyria, and it is not a past, and he to Adi. Oved. We seemingly don't understand anything, but if we understand this, he's talking here about what will happen in the end times. So let's try to understand a little bit again. This is a whole topic that I can't get into right now. The verse, oh who will live from Samuel, describes the struggle with the children of Ishmael in the end times between Israel and the children of Ishmael. There's a whole process that we can talk about on another occasion. Let's describe exactly what's happening now in the conflict between us and the Arabs in the land of Israel. It's found in the words, oh who will live from Samuel. And the way to unravel it is through a midrash called Rekeb Ri Eliezer, which I mentioned to you earlier. But the last sentence he says is the next sentence, and Zim from the beginning of Kittim, and no Ashur, and no Aber, and it's also Ada Oved. What is it? So all of Israel knows what Zim is. What is Zim? The Israeli shipping company is called Zim. You know why it's called Zim? Because of this verse. The meaning of the word Zim is actually a fleet. It's a fleet of Zionist sugar ships. Zim, but what is meant here, as mentioned, is long before the establishment of the State of Israel and long before the establishment of the State of Israel. The Israeli shipping company called Zim, this word appears in the Torah in the book of Numbers. What is it? Zim from the hand of Kittim. So to us it seems like just words. Zim from the hand of Kittim. And we see Assyria and we see Eber. The past is the people of Israel, the Hebrews, the Jews. And it is also a working people. So there is a description of Assyria here, who torments Eber. But what is Zim from the hand of Kittim? When we go to the Ramban explains things in several places, both in his commentary on the book of Numbers and also in the book of Redemption. We first see Rashi before the Ramban, oh, who will live from Samuel. On the previous verse. And he quotes Shalom and says, oh, who will live from Samuel. Rashi says like this, oh, who will live from Samuel. Who can revive himself? Momo these, that is, when the Holy God, blessed be He, will bring all these things to reality. Who can live because there will be a very difficult situation here. Who can revive himself? Momo these, that is, when the judge will put them on him, that is, when Sennacherib will stand. And confuse all the idolaters, that is, all the nations of the world. And Zim from the hand of Kittim will come. And pass by. Thus Rashi says, and the Kittim, who are the Romans in large capitals, will pass over Assyria, the Romans, the Kittim. He says, the Kittim is Rome, the Romans, and they will come over Assyria, and we, Assyria. And we, have passed over. Okay, Rashi explains, and the Kittim are large ships. As it is written, and a mighty fleet, the Berniat, which he mentioned to you before, is a fleet. Large ships that will come to Assyria. Now, you need to understand that Assyria is the historical Assyria that conquered the 10 tribes, but Assyria is Syria, which is Esran. And he is talking here about the spear of the seas. He says, I will tell you what I will call you. I will tell you what this people will do in the last days. So he is talking about the fact that in the last days, large Berniats will come. Berniats are ships, a large merchant fleet, a hunting fleet of ships of the Romans, heading towards Syria. This is what Rashi says. Look at what the Ramban says. The Ramban says, fleets will come from the Kittim. And they are the Romans, and he is referring to the Assyria mentioned, and he is referring to the name Israel, meaning the Shiites who conquered and the Gol who conquered. This is Assyria who conquered the 10 tribes, and the nations are the people of Israel. The 10 tribes. And he is also a Deoved. And he is also a Deoved. At the end. Who are the Kittim? Both Rashi and the Ramban say that the stain is the Romans. And here he has completed his words. The Ramban continues with the loss of the Kittim because they are the 4th beast that lied in the hand of the Messiah, as he said, and the servant became a soul, and the daughter became a woman. And here he refers to the vision of Daniel, who saw the 4 kingdoms of Babylon, Persia, and the science of Greece and Edom, Rome, in the form of 4 beasts. And the 4th beast is Edom, which is the Romans. And he is also a Deoved. Because you have completely destroyed their memory. And this is famous from the words of our sages, because the 4th beast that Daniel saw is Rome, which was exiled, and it is the one that was carried away by the hand of the Messiah. Now he explains, and do not drink from each other, because the third kingdom is Greece, as is explained there in Daniel, and how it is from the seed of Greece. Now he explains like this. Now if we go historically, it is very interesting to see these things. It is written in the book of Genesis that when Noah came out of the ark, his 3 sons came out with him to Ham. And Japheth is now mentioned. In the Torah, the dynasties of Shem, Ham and Japheth. On Japheth it is written like this. Japheth had 7 children, and the sons of Japheth were Gomer and Magog and Media and Greece and Tubal and Meshech and Tiras. There are 7 children in Japheth. One of them is Greece. And the sons of Japheth were Gomer and Magog. Magog is the one who is going to lead the war of Gog and Magog. This is the second son, but Gomer and Magog and Media and Greece. After that, the dynasties are mentioned, meaning the children of each of them. On the sons of Greece it is written like this, and the sons of Greece were Elisha and Tarshish, Kittim and Dudim. Kittim, this is the son of Greece. Thus it is written in the Torah that the youngest is the son of Greece. Now the third kingdom that we were under in exile was the exile of Greece, which was Alexander the Great until Antiochus, which was the period of 180 years that they ruled the land. And indeed the Romans came. Now it is written here, and immediately the Kittim, this is the Romans. So if the Kittim is the son of Greece, it follows that the Romans are descendants of Greece. In contrast, we saw earlier that the Romans are Edom, so how does that work out? Edom is Esau. Esau is from the descendants of Japheth. That is, it is as if 2 completely different dynasties were created. If the Hittites are from the descendants of Greece, then they are from the descendants of Japheth. If they are from the descendants of Japheth, how does that work out with Edom? Esau and Esau are from the descendants of Shem, from the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, from the descendants of Abraham and Isaac. Now he explains this here, and don't be fooled by this, because the third kingdom is Greece, as it is explained there in Daniel, and that the Greeks ended the Greeks, as it is said. And the Greeks, Elisha and Tarshish, were Kittim cousins. Now he explains this way, because they died, and our elders remember them with gratitude, as they said. Italy of Greece is a great ice that was created. This is how it is written in the Gemara. Italy of Greece of Greece. Italy today is Rome. Rome is in Italy. Now he says here that in the Gemara it is written that Italy was of Greece. This is a great power that was in Rome. Now he explains this way, and it is known that the name of the land that the Romans built was a college. In their books and in their language, Italy, but the matter is like in Canaan, because the Jebusite, the Hivite, the Girgashite, and the Hivite are the sons and fathers of some of the Canaanites, but they will be considered each and every one a nation in their own right, as it is said, the Hittite, the Girgashite, the Hivite, and the Canaanite. But they were all the children of Canaan, right? And yet, the Hittite, the Girgashite, the Merite, the Canaanite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite are 7 great and mighty nations. And so it was that for each and every one of these sons there was a great nation, a nation in itself, and those nations were called by the name of their father. And the rest of the Canaanites who did not bury their fathers will be referred to as Canaan, and the land of Canaan will be referred to as the father. Now, he brings here additional examples in various places, and now he explains here, 2. That the Greeks Elisha and Tarshish referred to Greece, meaning Elisha and Tarshish as cousins. So Elisha and Tarshish are cousins. They are Greeks, they referred to Greece, and they are the third kingdom, and Kittim, who was the son of Greece. But he became a great nation in his own right. It will be considered a fourth kingdom, and its kingdom will last until the Messiah and will claim it by his hand. This is what the Ramban says about this verse, and a fleet from the hands of the Kittim. When it comes to the end of days, when the Kittim will come to war against Syria and ultimately they will be destroyed, we will see after that if we have time in the Zohar. Now, the Ramban in the Book of Redemption goes into a little more detail. Let's see in the Book of Redemption. This is an article that he wrote about the future redemption in the end of days. He writes like this. And when God wanted to show Daniel the exile of his people, he said to him, know that we will destroy them in the kingdom of the Chaldeans. The Chaldeans are the Babylonians. After them, in their place, the Persians will rule over them. After them, the Greeks will seize their kingdom. And they will also rule over your people. After that, the Romans will prevail over them and they will enslave Israel until the time of the end. Now, simply from a historical perspective, this also requires a correct explanation. The Romans destroyed the Second Temple and took us into exile. But where are they today? There are no Romans today. Who are the Romans? This is Rome. Italy. Italy is not a superpower and it doesn't simply enslave us, right? So here we need to add the following point. Before the Romans went bankrupt as an empire, they established the Vatican in Rome and they actually established Christianity. The one who built the rise of Christianity in the world as a huge religion was Emperor Constantine. Right before the collapse of the Roman Empire, he was the one who established Christianity and established the Vatican. Now the Vatican exists and still exists today and it controls the whole world, meaning the whole Western world. Everyone is basically under the protection of the Vatican. Right. Rome itself today is not a superpower, but what they established therein Rome, and that is what is actually the transformation that took place. Meaning the military power of Rome became a religious power that controls the world. It controls all the major countries, the countries of Europe, the United States. You see today, the United States is actually talking about the world superpower, the United States. As you know, everyone who lives here knows the United States. The country is very religious. Look now at what the election campaign looks like. They are constantly talking about Jesus and Christianity, and at least in the Republican camp. The United States is a very religious country, meaning that overall it is the power that controls the world and it controls Israel. It controls the Jews. Although there is some fiction of people who want to deceive themselves that we have a free people. In our country, we are not free, and in our country we are completely enslaved to American interests. And the most Israeli prime minister who would want to do the most for the benefit of Israel and not for the benefit of his own pocket, as there were certain prime ministers in the past. He cannot do the interests of Israel. He is obligated to the European Union and he is obligated to the government in the United States, and he cannot do what he wants. In short, we cannot. We do not govern the country according to our interests. Rather, we are forced to dance according to the interests of the Americans and the entire world. When in fact this means that we have no control. We are not independent. In any case, this is what is written here. And they were enslaved in Israel until the end of time, until the end, because their kingdom will not be established only by the redeeming Messiah. But if there were other kingdoms in the world, what are these kingdoms? The Scripture does not list them and does not describe them to Daniel. He refers here indirectly to why the Arabs are not mentioned in the four kingdoms. Why does Ishmael mention them? Then he says, there may be additional kingdoms, but here we are talking about the main kingdoms that mainly rule the world, because he doesn't need to show them for the duration of the exile. Now he goes on to say this, and it is known that the Romans of the Galilean era during the reign of Titus, Aspanius I, and Vespasian were not Ishmaelites. Therefore, wherever we are in a Roman Galilean era, because we have not yet purified ourselves. This is known from the words of our sages and also from the books of the Romans. And here he mentions a very interesting historical detail, that the third that belonged to Alexander over Rome during the time of the Greeks, the third that belonged to Alexander over Rome, fought with the king in Macedonia, the land of Greece, after the death of Alexander the Great, the ruler, and defeated him. First, the destruction of the temple, and then the Greeks returned to the service of the Romans. After the Romans became a superpower and the Greeks actually became